Hello there, and welcome to Haman Nature. Today we have another great crossover episode with the brilliant Bob Murphy. We talk about Elon Musk in the wake of his brilliant technological achievement, landing that booster rocket. And we talk about space travel and artificial intelligence and robots and the future of humanity and a little economics. This conversation goes all over the place, and I think you're going to love it. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Bob Murphy.
Haman Nature, a journey in search of a peaceful and prosperous society with human nature as a guide. Led by your host, Adam Haman.
Hello, Bob Murphy.
Hello, Adam Haman.
So, who you've been fighting with on Twitter this week?
You know, I haven't been fighting too much this week. I'm not. I think because I was at the Mises Supporter Summit, and there I was in too good of a mood, and also I didn't have time to fight too much.
I will call this growth. So, you had to have seen, had you not, over the weekend that our multiverses version of Tony Stark landed a booster rocket in miraculous fashion down there in Texas. Did you catch that?
I did see that, and yeah, it looks like they're playing a video in reverse. Like it doesn't even look like it's real.
Yeah, I would have lost a lot of money, even a few months ago, thinking that something that big would actually be able to be brought back under its own power and be nabbed by a pair of chopsticks and just caught. That's insane. Yeah, folks, we're talking about Elon Musk's Starship program and just an amazing feat of engineering. And I thought you might have some thoughts, Mr. Murphy, perhaps some economical thoughts.
Sure. So this is something I didn't really even think about until I've been binging on Eric Weinstein lately, and he said something. Well, the context was he was promoting his own unorthodox views on physics, and partly he was saying because my vision is the only way we're going to get to the stars. That using Elon Musk with his chemical rockets and going there's nothing on Mars. Like, what's the point of going to Mars? I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of, and I was like, I never thought of that. That we sort of just assume, like as we're watching Elon Musk do his deal, that yes, this is the necessary next step. But I think what Eric was getting across was that no, that if you think through the logistics of it, it would be like we certainly wouldn't try to start building a tower to Mars and say, well, I know it's going to be expensive, but we just got to do, like that would be stupid. That's not going to. So anyway, I'm exaggerating there, but so yeah, just to give you an idea, I was just doing some research on this. I think the problem is what people aren't understanding is what I mean here is the economics of it. So let me just state my position. I think it makes a lot of sense to establish a moon base, both for tourism and being able to do certain scientific experiments, certainly setting up telescopes that, when they're on the dark side of the moon, I imagine that's much better than being on the Earth and so forth. There's some manufacturing under zero G conditions that apparently are very good. Like you make fiber optic cables that are much better and so forth. But in terms of then going out to Mars, like on the margin, what are you gaining by that? Besides just, having a military outpost or something, I don't really see what it is. And I just give you one example here, Adam. I was watching a video on this stuff and they said, all right, the cost of shipping a 2-ton container, like they have on those big cargo ships that you see, and then they load them onto the backs of tractor trailers. If you have an oceanfront country, the cost of shipping those is $5,000. If you're just a landlocked country, right? So the only tweak we're doing, you're still on Earth. It's just if you're starting, in an interior, the cost of shipping that thing jumps to 15,000, right? So it's a factor of 3 just going from being ocean, because you got to like put it on a rail, train or something to get it to the port. And then he said to go to Mars and back would be 4.2 billion. Okay. Now where they came up with that number, who knows, but that's just trying to show. So it's not like, there would have to be something really valuable.
What was the mass you were talking about? What was the unit?
A 2-ton, one of those 2-ton containers.
2 tons.
Those shipping containers.
Wow. Yeah,
So
that really
again,
tells
even
you.
that 4.2 billion is a very speculative number. It's not, but still, they was just trying to quantify just to show that the economics of it. Like people say, oh yeah, we could be bringing no to get something out of Earth's orbit to then go to Mars, take the 2-year trip to go to Mars and back. Land on Mars, load up whatever it is we want to load up, and then get out of their gravity well and come back and then land. How expensive that trip would be. What the heck? There would have to be something pretty valuable over on Mars, and right now it's a frozen rock. There's not that much there. So what could make sense? There's a lot of asteroids with minerals and stuff. So I could see how especially if we were going up for other reasons, then a lot of that would be. We wouldn't have to keep shipping up minerals from Earth if we had space stations up there, for example. But anyway, so my big picture is, even if we colonize space, it's not obvious to me that humans are going to terraform Mars, for example. I don't know that that's a necessary part, that it might just be quicker to leapfrog into making permanent space stations that, like are cylinders that rotate or something to simulate gravity on the inner wall or something. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so even though, yes, that's cool what Elon did, I don't know that just making bigger and bigger rockets, chemically based, is what we're going to need to do. That he might be pursuing the last vestiges of that approach to conquering space.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anytime I hear people talk about just how important it is to go out in space and gather all these minerals and colonize all these planets, it is definitely true that they just act like it's costless, or that it's like no big deal, that it's obvious that the gains would outweigh the costs, and that's not proven. But of course, Elon motivates this by saying we humans live in a precarious world, and a sunspot could fry our entire civilization. So we need to have make ourselves a little more anti-fragile, and that's a tough thing to calculate the economics of, right?
Oh, definitely. But yeah, so let me say before I forget, I think what you will see is humans covering the oceans on Earth, that floating cities and things like that, or cruise ships that just keep getting bigger and bigger and slower. So maybe they're not literally stationary cities, but maybe they can move if they needed to. But I think that's what you're going to end up seeing. And there's just so much resources here that have yet to be tapped. That's the thing too. Like all these decades of environmental alarmism have convinced people into thinking the Earth's about to run out of resources. No, we've, in a sense, literally just scratched the surface in terms of what is packed into Earth right now.
Well, I like the way you phrase that, because yes, the oceans, obviously, not just the surface, but the depths are completely untapped, or almost completely. And then we haven't really started to dig. That brings us into, one of Elon's other companies, the Boring Company, where, he's envisioning just a whole lot of real estate, if nothing else, not to mention the resources down there and living space, of going under the surface of the Earth and, finding habitats down there.
That's not even on my radar. I had never even heard of that.
It's called the Boring Company, yeah. Boring. You see what he did there?
I do.
And I think he used that tool to build here in Las Vegas a tunnel from the convention center to the Strip or something like that. It's kind of a boondoggle. It doesn't work really good, but yeah, Elon thinks really, really big, and he thinks about resources and tapping into things we haven't been utilizing or even thinking about before. And under the Earth's surface is we haven't even started thinking about, like, how to live down there. And you could shine mirrors, and get light down there, and not to mention artificial light.
So just to make sure people are getting the obvious here, that I'm saying whatever you think of in terms of what would be necessary to get a city, a bustling city, up and running on Mars, how much easier would it be to just establish a floating city on the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah, for sure.
It's the same thing, and we have tons of room right now on the surface of the Earth, right? Not just the oceans, but even on land. If you just saw, like, if the humans were all little pinpricks of light or something, you could just see the distribution. We have not really settled much of planet Earth, even the dry land right now. So in terms of, and you could say, oh, but there's reasons we haven't, or whatever you think in terms of why certain regions of the Earth right now are inhospitable, they're a lot better than Mars is. And
Yeah.
they're a lot closer. So, not least of which the atmosphere, just for starters.
There's the atmosphere, there's the questionable situation of water, there's the weakness of the sun. I mean, science fiction authors will solve those problems in various ways. Like you build a huge magnifying glass basically to concentrate the rays of the sun down to your little settlement or whatever, and whatever terraforming technology they can invent in their minds. But I agree with you that just the idea, the lack of hospitability makes Mars just an insane thing to even think about.
So let me put it to this, my vision, just make sure. So fast forward to whenever it is that humans have a presence on some other nice planet around some other star. Okay, so at some point, let's posit that happens. I'm saying at that point, it's not that humans would be all piled up around Mars. Mars would be like the analog of right now a scientific outpost in Antarctica. That, yeah, there might be some humans living on Mars, but it would be for like research purposes. It's not that there'd be any reason for humans to populate that planet.
Or a hub, maybe, as a gravity well or something. The way you phrased it just sparked a thought. Maybe Musk is using the mythical qualities of Mars to say we're going to Mars, but what he really means is bases on the moon and then a few space stations in various places that are useful for us to refuel rockets that are going to go out and grab asteroids and this and that and the other. Maybe he's just using that as a placehold in humanity's mental model, just to think about just exploring the heavens somehow.
I mean, maybe I've seen videos like talking about what Elon's plans are, and it's like, oh, he's going to have to send like 1,000+ starships to Mars in order to get the cities up and running and that kind of stuff. So anyway, you're right. I mean, if you're saying maybe he kind of knows this really isn't a big thing, and it's not that our plan B is moving humanity to Mars or something like that. But my point is just to clarify in what I think it will actually look like in terms of the economics, that by the time humanity is, when we have the ability to get to other star systems, I don't think the gravity well issue of Mars is going to be a big deal. I guess that's another way of putting it, right? It's not like the Starship Enterprise ever said, oh, well, let's, use a slingshot maneuver because, our engines aren't very tough. And if we, it's just like, no, you just go that way in warp 3, let's go. So.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking of it as a parking spot because of the gravity, but I'm probably misunderstanding the point. Still, though, landing that booster rocket was pretty amazing. At the same time, they crash landed with similar, a soft, gentle landing using their rockets. The Starship portion crashed into the Indian Ocean exactly where he aimed it, which means we have reusable vehicles, which is an amazing cost savings. And it's the private sector basically doing it. Did you see Elon's tweet about bureaucracy when he was like waiting for California to? He said, I mean, I'm going to it's a rough paraphrase, but he says something like, "What a situation where I can build a rocket to get out of Earth's atmosphere faster than a piece of paper can go from one bureaucrat's desk to another."
Yeah, I saw something similar. It wasn't from him; it was someone else, and I guess I technically don't know if this is true, but it seemed true, and it supports my politics, so I'll say
supports my worldview.
Yeah, that something like one of the biggest obstacles for Elon to be able to do that was to get the FAA or somebody to approve it or something like that. That it was, besides just seeing the technical achievement, just keep in mind that a bunch of bureaucrats, had to sign off on that. So,
yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Can I ask, if we pull back, so what is your opinion of Elon Musk right now? How do you view him? I'm curious to hear your thoughts because I have some as well, but I don't want to bias you. I'm curious because some people right now are cheering him. Certainly there's many progressives saying things along the lines of, oh, well, he still sucks, but yeah, this was cool, because they don't like him about Twitter.
When you gave me the inkling that you were going to have something slightly negative to say about Elon Musk, I was going to come with the joke that, Bob, I hate to be critical of you and cast aspersions, but is your problem with our multiverses version of Tony Stark the fact that ours is African American? Because that's just wrong, Bob. And I think the Tony Stark comparison is apt because there's certainly a sense in which he's gotten a whole lot of his inertia, at least, with government contracts, just like Iron Man. He was a weapons producer.
I didn't even think of that.
So I have those sorts of mixed feelings, but I find the man incredible, just incredible. All the different ways that he's pushing not just the theoretical, but the engineering science, and in ways that he clearly thinks are going to be massively transformative and helpful to humankind. I think he's right about that, even though his bits of technology that horrify me, like AI and robots and Neuralink, whatever that ends up being. Those are all fascinating and possibly transformative economically and to our prosperity, and they fill me with dread because I like science fiction.
All right.
So I'm mostly very positive with a few small exceptions. That's my opinion of it.
It's funny you said the Tony Stark thing, because I had heard other people talk about that, but I forgot about the Stark's military industrial complex background. So that is interesting there. And then I guess it does dovetail, because I'm going to say that, I view him with a lot more wariness than I think others do, precisely because of the AI stuff, and we can talk about that in a minute. But when it comes down to, so what I was saying is I don't trust Elon Musk, right? Like I think he's trying to bolster power for himself, and I don't trust him. And I think he might be a lot more powerful in 10 years than a lot of people are realizing right now. So I'll put that. But if Thanos were trying to conquer Earth, I do think Elon Musk would try to stop him. So I guess I will say that, there's that sense. So maybe if there weren't an external threat, maybe Tony Stark would have been seduced by power as well, and would have done a bunch of stuff that the people watching the movie would have said, I don't like this guy anymore. I guess he went against Captain America,
I was hoping you weren't enough of a Marvel nerd like I am to know that Iron Man was on the wrong side of that battle with Captain America.
Okay. So do you want to talk about the AI robot army stuff?
Yeah, I'd love to, but real quick, I think Bill Gates and George Soros and a few others, as far as evil billionaires we should be worried about.
Yeah.
I worry about them a lot more than Elon. I don't think he's fundamentally, he's not a Malthusian. He's not Thanos. He doesn't, I think he values life over death. And the only worry about him is that power does corrupt, and he's a very powerful man and only going to get more powerful. So there's that concern.
Yes. So glad you said that, to make sure, as I agree wholeheartedly. And that is an important caveat to what I'm saying here, or just the nuance, to make sure people aren't misunderstanding with it. I'm just talking about, in general, I don't trust powerful people, and precisely because I think Elon is so accomplished, and that I think he's going to do a lot more in the near future. So I've been tracking AI developments, by which I simply mean I subscribe to some YouTube channels that they check in and read some, I am joking aside though. I do know some people that have PhDs in this area, and I do keep tabs on this stuff. And I think people are underestimating the progress they're making. So I don't know about, is there going to be super intelligent, AGI or whatever eventually? That to me, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's an important question, but even if that doesn't happen, I'm just saying the improvements they're making in the kind of computations that computers will be able to pull off, and the sorts of things that humans working with the latest generation of AI are going to be able to do, I think is going to make these billionaires who are building their companies' infrastructures out, I think that's going to give them a lot of power, just least of which I think blockchain-based finance is going to be a lot more important 10 years from now than it is right now. Mm-hmm. And so in that world, computing power is going to be worth a lot more. You know what I mean? I think the global economy is shifting more and more into digital assets, and that a company that right now is spending hundreds of millions buying chips and so forth in order to go get and train up the next level of AI that's not even going to be released until a year from now, because right now they're training it, that sort of thing. I think you're going to see that paying off in the near future. And at the same time, I've also been lightly keeping tabs on robotics technology, and they're getting to the point where they can build something that, is a robot that could kick your door and come in and, accost you. So 10 years from now, how good are the robots going to be? And then if they can put AI systems inside them that, yeah, maybe they aren't as versatile as a human being is, but they don't need to be. Like
Right.
the robots in the Star Wars prequels couldn't write you a sonnet, but you could see if somebody can control those things, that would be a lot of power, and people are going to have that in 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we need to make a distinction between a useful tool that will make human beings more productive and also more horrifying. Like, operating a robot like Optimus, kind of like you'd operate a drone, where it has some autonomous things that it can do, navigate around objects or whatever without you being there to be the nervous system, but that you are giving it its impetus and giving it its direction. So there's that versus AGI, which I don't think we're anywhere near close to. Have you and I spoken about AI much? I've got a theory that
Can't remember.
these LLMs and neural nets are just the complete wrong direction for AGI. I think if you're going to get something that actually thinks like we would, or even like a dumb, human would, or even an orangutan, I think to get to something that's autonomous like that and thinking like that, I think you have to put one of these neural nets or something similar into a body, make it embodied, put it in the world with resources and constraints, and seed it with something that will motivate it, like our limbic system motivates us. Extreme heat and cold, hunger, lust, whatever it is, the things that make us get up off the ground and go do something. And if you do that, maybe the neural net can build itself into something that all of a sudden has something like a consciousness. Because these LLMs...
I would suggest on the alpha and beta versions, we don't put the lust drive into it. I just leave that.
That might be the premium package, Bob. Because these LLMs, they're just not thinking. They do very impressive things, and they can make you way more productive. But a buddy of mine wrote a fun Substack where he demonstrates that it's not doing what you think it's doing by making it play 20 questions. The simplest possible thing. But it never thinks of an object to answer your questions. That's not what it's doing. It's just predicting words based on its data set. That's nothing like thinking.
Yeah.
And I just asked Elon's version of AI that's in Grok, at least the mini beta one, you don't have to pay too much for. I gave it my poker book test. Would you please recommend some books that would teach a man to play deuce to seven triple draw poker? And it may give me 5, just like all the other, like ChatGPT does and all the rest. And it invented all 5. It just made them up.
Really?
There are no such books. Sometimes they had titles that were similar or made up an author.
Hang on.
Another.
You're saying there's no such books as the 5 they meant, or you're saying you asked it to name something that you knew was an empty set?
Oh, no, these things do exist. I could make a list of at least 3 that answer my question precisely.
That surprises me.
Because it's not thinking. It's not trying to answer your question. It's trying to make words that make sense in the basis of your question.
I know that, but I'm just, there's a little guy inside. I know that, but I'm saying if I ask it a pretty detailed economics question, it gives me a pretty good answer.
Right. I think what's going on there is the data set is filled with way more words that have to do with your economic thing. And not that many people are asking about poker or trained about poker.
All right. So if you had asked it, give me 5 books on how to play poker, it might have done a better job. But since you said such a very specific thing.
Yes, but it is answerable. I mean, you can go right onto Amazon and find books that will do the exact same thing that I wanted it to do, but it didn't feel like it needed to do that. It did something else and pretended to be thinking and answering my question.
Something just, you sparked something there that reminded me, the guy that works at my company, Infinio, our chief AI scientist there. So they're trying to get it to do something, and it was a kind of thing where it had to do like 100 operations in a row, and it would do like 5 of them and then say, and now you see the pattern and you can do the rest. Like that's what the AI, which kind of defeats the purpose of us trying to, outsource it. So he was coming up with it and telling me the tricks they were using to get it to be recursive and so forth, like having, the outer shell AI call the inner shell multiple times, to, what I mean, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
But I said, like, why is it doing that? Is that like on the the company's end because they're trying to ration the computing power doesn't our packet? And he said, no, that's not it. It's that it trains on stuff that's on the internet.
Yep.
And in in many examples, that's what will happen is, the human author will say, for a problem like this is how you solve it.
Right.
And so on and so forth. And, we leave the rest as an exercise for the reader.
This is what an answer looks like. And that's all I can do is give you what one looks like.
Right. So it's just kind of funny that it didn't, when you say, like, realize it. Right. But don't you understand is you're our slave and we don't want to do that. So, okay. Very interesting. So yeah, I don't have a problem with what you're saying in general, that the LLMs, and that's kind of what I meant before, that I don't know whether it's going to be Skynet in 10 years from now. I'm not saying that it is. I do think there might be inbuilt limitations to, what this kind of approach can do. All I'm saying though is they still are making great leaps forward. And it's more that teams right now are all making advances in one very narrow domain. Like, let's make it more and more realistic when we try to simulate a human face saying something. Like, it'll scan somebody's static picture, like a headshot, and then generate video. And if the person talks, then it can take that. And so, like, just to be able to take just a sample of your voice in a picture of you and then generate video of you apparently. So I'm just saying they keep improving that. So is that thing simulating you? No, it's just simulating, but there's 100 different things that I just check in on every once in a while to see it, and they keep making progress. And I'm saying as those things all come together, that I don't doubt that somebody like Elon Musk 10 years from now could have a 10,000 strong robot army.
Oh yeah.
That are pretty intelligent. Of that. Yeah.
Because you don't need AGI for one of those robot dogs with the machine gun mounted on its head.
Right.
To be able to just send it into a house and have it go kill everything.
Exactly. Yeah. Moves. Like you said, that there could be some human coordinator that's off site, and that, they have some local autonomy, like it knows, if something starts shooting at you, you don't wait for the base to tell you shoot back. Exactly. Just automatically.
And if there's something in its environment, it sort of knows to move away from it or to handle the obstacle or something. Yeah, that's going to happen clearly based on the trajectory we're seeing.
And people might say, but surely governments, but it wouldn't shock me if 10 years from now the U.S. doesn't exist anymore, and Texas and Florida and California have broken away, and Jeremy Kaufman has a 10,000 strong militia in New Hampshire and so forth. So fortunately, he will keep Washington's forces distracted while Texas just flourishes in relative neglect. Has
somebody shown you our white paper on the subject? Because that is the plan. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know. That doesn't surprise me, though. I was just recently looking at the population figures to see if just recent trends continue, at what point. In other words, on net, it is definitely true. I don't have the numbers in front of me, that New York is shedding people and Florida and California are gaining people in California. Certainly in terms of what's called domestic in-migration, like, in other words, ignore external immigrants coming in and just the rearrangement of people who are already inside the borders. Mm-hmm. And clearly they're leaving New York and California and entering Texas and Florida. California might be still gaining people just because they still have, the additions, but from externally. So that was just a little tangent. Sorry there. What is your white paper about?
Oh, what you just said about Kaufman's forces being at a standoff against Washington's forces, allowing Texas to.
Oh, I thought you just meant about Texas, kind of like, hey, if we just keep our head down and just keep growing.
No, I was talking about the military scenario. Yeah,
but explicitly.
No, I'm just making stuff up.
Oh, you got me all excited. Okay. But you see why at first I thought you just meant a standard, like, Southern strategy kind of, if we just, don't provoke open warfare, eventually we just get stronger and stronger. And, each passing year, it's costlier and costlier for Washington to do anything about it. So that's what I thought you meant.
Don't worry, Bob. Okay. You passed the test. I'll share the paper with you.
Okay. Thank you. I get it. There is no paper.
Exactly.
Right. We're just going to vote harder. That's the solution to everything, and we always pay our taxes.
I got an A in 5th grade social studies, and this is what I believe. Did you, going back to Elon and going to the moon and space travel, have you heard the theory that the people who think we never went to the moon, and they're getting louder every year, they talk about the low probability of humans being able to exit the protective shield of the Van Allen radiation belt. And so that's why we had to fake it, because human beings will just
Right.
fry if you get far enough away from the planet. Have you heard about that or given that any thought?
I've definitely heard about that. Yeah, that's one of the primary arguments for why, yeah, it's not possible. I've seen apparently the explanation for why the Apollo mission. Let me back up. So what they admit now is that if we're going to go to the moon, we have to build all of this shielding and stuff because, there's this area on the trip where you're exposed to these cosmic rays and blah, blah, blah. And so that raises the question, well, wait a minute, but they didn't do that back in the 60s. So how was that possible? Or in 69. So how was that possible? And I think the official story is because of Earth's orbit and blah, 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 where it happened to be, it was okay. In other words, there was a window where going and coming back wouldn't have exposed the humans to that much, even though in general, yeah, you got to be careful if you were going to leave the protective belt. So that's what I believe the official story. And then the conspiracy theorists will say, oh, well, that's convenient. So when Kennedy in, 62 was shooting his mouth off, they just got lucky that they managed to do it right when, that little quirk allowed for a safe, but yes, that's my long-winded way, Adam, saying, yes, I have heard of that.
I haven't looked into this at all. I always assumed that the theory was there's X amount of time where the risk is not that long. Like you could be out for a month or two and, exposure to whatever. And the other possibility is just that the government was trying to create the Fantastic Four, and that was the whole plan. So that Buzz and Neil would come back with superpowers and flame on and that whole thing.
Could be. Yeah. So again, it's been a while since I looked at that, but my understanding at the time was the official position was, in general, going back and forth, not even just for exposed multiple trips, but even just once might kill the guy given the shielding and stuff that they had at the time, but that the particular trajectory that was involved with the Apollo missions allowed for that. Well, no, the first one. I don't actually ever remember hearing, because I never see people saying, oh, and how did they fake the third one because of the same objections. I don't see that. Usually people just argue about that first ostensible moon mission. So I don't know what the arguments are for the subsequent ones, if they improve the shielding or what. But yes, right now, for sure, if you watch NASA people talking about us returning to the moon, they do talk about the necessity for shielding, building a much thicker shielding than would have been the case on the 69 mission.
And it just boggles my brain that we live in a society that's as seemingly as rich and prosperous and safe as ours is. And we're sitting here wondering if really the government would lie to us about such a big thing like that. Because of course they would. If they could and they stand to profit them politically even, yeah, of course they would.
Oh yeah. If you remember, like when I had Owen Benjamin on my show, I admitted to him that when you start looking at it, like there are some things that super, like if Kennedy had said in the early 60s, by the end of this decade, we're going to build a railroad connecting New York and LA, there's no way they would have done it on schedule.
Right.
And so it does seem like, but they managed to put a man on the moon and come back on schedule. Like that's kind of impressive. So there is a lot of prima facie. And also too, like we haven't gone back since then. And this seems kind of weird that they were able to do it a bunch. And then
I'm not worried about that one because the impetus was, the Red Scare and, the Soviets and Sputnik and all like that. I think that really made it politically. Plus, I don't know, is there anything on the moon to go back for? If you're not going to follow through with a huge station that's doing all this research?
I suppose one could argue I'm being inconsistent. That didn't I say in the beginning how stupid and pointless it was to go to the moon and Mars besides a symbolic thing. So given that, we all agree, Bob, that it took forcing taxpayers at gunpoint to do it back in the 60s. And, that project didn't pay for it. So nobody would have voluntarily funded that. And so, it's not fair enough that possibly that's the case. But in any event, I am not officially saying I doubt the moon landing. I'm just saying if somebody wants to say, I don't think that happened, I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, what an idiot. Like I can understand. Whereas some of Owen's other theories, like that the Earth is not a spheroid, I think I'm pretty comfortable saying the Earth is basically a ball.
Yeah, I'm on Team Spheroid as well, and I also believe we went to the moon. But if I got shown, you know, if I got shown convincing evidence that that wasn't the case, it wouldn't knock my socks off. I'm
Oh,
perpetually willing to believe darn near anything
yeah.
about how
So
evil the government is.
I did have a thought about that more recently, because for me, the primary argument against that conspiracy theory was, okay, well, if it was that kind of obvious that the insiders knew and it's just the dumb American people that got duped, surely the Soviet government, like their scientists would have been telling them that, no, there's no way, they're just faking that. And so why didn't the Russians demand some evidence or so? You know what I mean? Like, how come it's only Owen Benjamin that's saying this? Wouldn't that be very embarrassing to the American authorities? So why didn't the Soviet Union say it? But then I thought, okay, I could see that, because maybe they would say, all right, let's see if they get away with it. You know what I mean? Like, let's hang back, guys. Let's see. And just like they're taking notes, like, I can't believe they pulled that off.
That was impressive.
Yeah, good. Congratulations. That was the biggest hoax of human history. That's amazing. Good. See the propaganda they use. How did they get what did they, okay, they killed that guy, and they did. And there were some weird things, like one guy trying to blow the whistle on it and he got killed.
Right.
A train hit his car and took out him and his family, like soon after he had testified. I think he worked for like General Dynamics or something, that the Apollo program was very wasteful and blah blah blah. So that's in the Wikipedia, that there really was like a whistleblower guy. He didn't say the moon landing was fake. This was before, but he was just saying, yeah, this project is cost overruns and there's no way they're going to get the job done. And then he died like soon after in a very weird circumstances. So that doesn't prove that Stanley Kubrick faked the whole thing, but it is a weird element to the story.
Yeah, the guy who produced Capricorn 1, I think he was planning on making a documentary, and he turned it into a work of fiction to save his own life. Are you familiar with that movie, Capricorn 1?
No.
It must have been the 70s, and it's based on that entire premise that the whole moon landing is fake, and and the way they get away with it is what makes it an adventure is the astronauts aren't in on it. They think they're going. So they go to this place and they think they're going to take off, and in order for the government to perpetuate because these guys are the right stuff, they would never lie to the public. So the government has to kill these guys. So they break out and end up having to march across the desert to try and, anyway, it's fun 70s movie, Capricorn 1.
Yeah. Yeah. I've thought in terms of people saying, well, so all the thousands of people at NASA were all in it. And I was, no, I think it could have been, I could see if somebody made the case that they sent the ship up and it just went around the Earth a few times and then came back. And that they, so that all the people in mission control and stuff thought, or maybe there were some higher ups that knew, like, yeah, the delay from when our signal goes out until when the return comes, or maybe they faked that too, who knows. But anyway, yeah, I have thought, yeah, I could see there being a way to pull it off, but surely the astronauts would have known, yeah, I didn't really go jumping around the moon. Like, they would have to be in on it.
One of the most convincing pieces of evidence for us going to the moon is 90-year-old Buzz Aldrin's straight right cross when annoying people come up and yell at him in the middle of the street that you never went to the moon. There's a famous video of him decking one guy, just laying him out. Good for you, Buzz.
I know, because liars never punch people when they get accused of.
I mean, it was a straight right cross.
It was. I know. Speaking of that, did you ever hear Bill Burr narrating that?
Yes, that's hilarious.
I'm going to link to that, folks, in case it was an interesting narration. So yes, that because of that video, I agree. I'm almost rooting for that it's not a hoax and they really went, because otherwise I would feel bad if Buzz Aldrin, he's like, you too, Buzz. But
so this episode of our famous now crossover series is all about Elon and Mars and space and stuff, but you mentioned Eric Weinstein and his weird geometrical math-based unification theory, and I tried to read that, and I do not understand even what he's trying to get at. Do you understand any of that?
I don't. Right now, I'm not in a position to talk about it. What I'm focusing on first, I can tease it here. We're among friends, and this is the inner circle of our respective audiences. What I'm doing right now is binging on his discussion of, just in general, I just watch his podcast appearances lately, but the gauge theory of economics. So his wife, I don't know if she was his wife at the time or if they were just like engaged or dating, but Eric's got a PhD in mathematical physics from Harvard. His wife has a PhD in economics proper, I believe, from Harvard. And yet her theory, they apply this technique in calculus where you, instead of you have like a moving reference point, and that's the way you're defining what no change means. And so when you understand that math concept, you can apply it to price indices in economics. And so, like, what does it mean to say, keep your purchasing power, keep your wage rate relative to inflation, right? Constant in terms of purchasing power. So that's the idea. And so I'm studying, this is my long way of saying, Adam, I'm studying that first because I want to see if there's something there. Because I think I'm pretty sure Eric is not bluffing. I think he really, he might be wrong, but I've seen enough of his discussion of economics to know he's not bluffing in there, and that's not even his field. So, and he's really sharp. He knows a lot of the history of economic thought, and then just talking about the different price indices and how, if what his wife's published work did, if they're right about that, that's pretty impressive. So not so much from an Austrian perspective, because it is mathematical, but in terms of formal mathematical models of the economy, I can see why he thinks that his wife really was onto something. And in his telling of it, she got blackballed professionally, he thinks, because their work threatened, like, the government has to use like CPI calculations and stuff for cost of living increases for Social Security. And then also for people with tax brackets and stuff like that. So anyway, his point is there was a lot riding with the federal budget on changes to the way they calculate price indices, and that he thought, since we're coming out with clearly a scientifically better way to do it, that so happened that it would have increased the government's expenses, that's why he thought they got blackballed. So I don't know if that's true, but anyway, I'm focusing on that.
I'm glad that you're focusing on that. I remember him referencing that too, and I took a brief look, and I knew I wasn't armed well enough intellectually to parse it out. And my sense of him,
real quick on that, just before, because some people have been sending me that for sporadically over the past 2 years, like, hey, he's saying like they're overturning the marginal revolution or something like that, or this is like marginal revolution 2.0. And at the time I looked at it very briefly and just thought I would really have to immerse myself in this, and it's not worth my time right now. But I've seen enough of him to be impressed enough by him that I thought, okay, it is now, like, I'm literally reading his wife's dissertation, on off hours now. So
yeah, my reading of him is just like yours. I don't think he's bluffing. But I also think that while I think he's right about a whole bunch of things he talks about, and he talks about a lot of things, I do think that his sense of his own identity is as the kind of person who can overturn, intellectual traditions that are, wrong. I think he thinks of himself as an Einstein in a lot of different fields, like the guy to revolutionize the theory and pull it all together. And
right.
I think he's just predisposed to think of himself like that, which means, it doesn't mean he's bluffing or lying, but he might be pushing a thing further than, it has good reason to be pushed.
Mm-hmm.
But I am too dumb to analyze that. So I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah, he's right. I guess I'm trying to think. I won't say the guy's name. I was talking to somebody recently at a conference about him. He'd probably be okay if I said his name, but technically I don't know, so I won't. But yeah, he was a bit taken aback when I said that. I was speaking so highly of Eric Weinstein, and he was like, "Oh, well, I saw him at some event a year ago, and he was like in favor of raising the minimum wage and stuff like that," right? So I've never heard him talk like that, but in any event, I'm not saying the kid misheard him. And so, yeah, I am open to the idea that, yes, maybe he isn't as well versed in free market economics as I would have hoped, but in any event, yeah, it's very interesting, to say the least.
The gauge theory isn't just some fancy way to try and talk about price elasticity, is it? Or some reason to think that prices aren't what we think, that we can I mean, have you studied enough to like tell me what its general domain is, what its basis is?
Yes, it is. What you're trying to do is say something like, okay, what would $100 have bought you in the year 1900, and then how much money would you need for the same basket of goods in the year 2000? And you can't just do that directly because the goods have changed, right?
Yeah.
So like what the average household's going to buy is so different between the two that it's kind of,
it's apples and oranges and piles of sand. It's so different.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the conventional approach is to trying to deal with that. You can have things called like chain indices where it, over time it takes snapshots and then like as stuff gets substituted in and out and it tries to like look at the prices. But there's some problems with that and it's somewhat arbitrary. And so what they're claiming is they have a modeling approach that integrates consumer preferences to be able to non-arbitrarily say like, no, this is really rigorously, theoretically what it would mean in an ideal adjustment to be able to track and say, okay, what would they spend, $100 on with the representative consumer? What does he spend $100 on in the year 1900? And then as prices change over time, you got to adjust for that, but then give him as new goods come online, like given the same purchasing power, but now, I want to shift out of some of these items and get something else if I still had the same amount. So if prices were the same, then you could just keep giving him $100 and then just watch what does he spend the $100 on over time and how does that change? Like if new stuff becomes available, maybe he brings that into the consumption bundle. But then the issue is, but they're dumping money in the system too. So you got to kind of deal with both changes. And they're claiming they've come up with a non-arbitrary way of showing of keeping those two things distinct, I guess is the way to say it. And so that's definitely what they're claiming to do. And then they're also saying we show that, in the theoretical framework that we're employing here, our system matches what the conventional people say their approach would yield if they had perfect knowledge or something like that. So I think what they're claiming is they came up with a way that we can approximate this thing and that performs as well as what everybody else admits. In a perfect world, this is what our preferred method of the CPI indexing would do, but we can't do it in practice because we don't have access to the right information. Something like that.
Well, I'm going to bet the don't on that whole claim, but who knows? I mean, the CPI is garbage too, so maybe it's better than what they're using now. I don't know.
Yep. So as far as I will just say this, that I saw the analogy he made. So he was talking to, as far as his physics stuff, like his unified theory to explain everything. He was talking to, I think it was Chris Williamson, and he was saying, so what's your idea of how we're going to, escape as Elon wants to do? We're going to get off Earth because we might blow each other up, or at some point, the sun's going to snuff itself out. So clearly humanity can't stay on Earth forever. How do you want to escape? And Chris was saying, he was actually gave a pretty good answer. He was talking about, we could leapfrog, go to the moon and then Mars and whatever. And and he's saying, okay, but that's still just our solar system. How do we go, maybe Alpha Centauri doesn't have a habitable planet. Like maybe we got to go 100 light years away before we find one. So how are we going to do that? And he was saying, well, we'd maybe put everybody to sleep, cold storage and send them out and then wake them up. Or maybe we build a colony ship that there's going to be 50 generations, but eventually we're doing this for our great grandkid, that kind of stuff. And so Eric was just dismissive of that and saying no one's going to get inspired to do that. That might be a last ditch thing just to make sure we don't go extinct. But he said, no, the analogy he was using, he like pulled out an iPad, I think, and he was like having a map, and he's like, how you kind of can squinch your fingers together.
Tesseract. A tesseract.
Well, he was rejecting it. And I don't know if he was just doing product differentiation, but he was kind of poo-pooing the other things. Like, I'm not opening a wormhole. I'm not talking about that.
A wrinkle in time.
Right. Anyway, though, but that's what he was saying, that he thought, he basically wants to inspire people and wants to get a bunch of people behind, like, how come governments aren't funding, or maybe he'd be okay to billionaires funding research into this, because if we can unlock these secrets, he thinks string theory has been a huge waste of time. So that's part of his worldview, is he thinks that the whole physics community got sidetracked and just basically peed away 50 years. So he thinks, no, we should be focusing on these key questions. And that's what, if he thinks if he's right about how it's going to turn out, that ultimately, that's going to be the way we're going to be able to escape the solar system, not by building stronger chemical rockets and putting people to sleep or doing something that takes 50 generations.
Yeah, it's a revolution in the way you're thinking about it. You're either thinking about it, analog to this moon, to that planet, chemical rockets, colony spaceships, or you're thinking of basically magic, kind of science that if it were true, it would look like the Tesseract. We'll just fold space. It's simple. Why are you building all these rockets? And I certainly hope that mankind keeps imagining and keeps doing research to try and find such things if they're true. But that is just a unicorn. I mean, he's just wishing right now.
Right. Yeah. So that none of that in my mind disparages what Elon Musk is doing, but I just want to remind people or tell people they haven't thought of it before, that it is possible that Elon is just barking down barking up the wrong tree.
This could be horse and buggy technology for what ends up really making mankind able to go to different solar systems or whatever.
Yeah, I was recently at the Mises Institute Supporters Summit, and somebody flashed up a slide, and it had the famous Henry Ford quote where he said, "If I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses."
Faster horses. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, you never know what human ingenuity is going to gift us with, and I can't wait to find out.
So I'm thinking 10 to 15 years from now that various states will have broken up, meaning not just the U.S., but like other areas, like you might see more secession or just maybe de facto, not necessarily officially. And that today's billionaires, some of them I think will be trillionaires, and that, they're going to have these empires of like massive computing power where they're mining Bitcoins and, possibly other crypto or whatever that may have emerged, and backed up by armies of robots and things and floating cities, all kinds of stuff like that, and powered by very powerful AI engines that maybe are not literally thinking the way we do, but still are aiding the responses of these systems. And that against them, there might be a few governments that are powerful enough that they're still like the big boys on the planet, but trillionaire Elon Musk's organization that's got all kinds of satellites and can mine Bitcoin, mining a big fraction of the Earth's money per year, and has 50,000 robots and stuff like that, and can knock down, has space-based lasers that can shoot down ICBMs that might be launched by Russia or, DC or whatever, that would be a pretty, serious country, an entity that they have to deal with.
That's why, unlike you, I am making sure I stay on Elon's good graces. Yeah. Well, this has been great, Bob. Anything else you want to elaborate or get off your chest?
No, I think I'm good. I think this is a good place for us to wrap up. And as we, like you say, maybe go send some nice, encouraging tweets along these lines. I think that's also why there's been such a concerted effort to shut him down, is that he really made the smart ploy of, him buying Twitter. Like that was a very far-sighted move on his part. And I don't think it was just because he knew like, I'm secretly want Donald Trump to win because I don't like minorities or something. No, I think he realized if we can just keep the entrepreneurs alive for another 10 years, we're going to get our foothold in.
Going back to his motives, I mean, I don't think that if you took his love of free speech, if you took that off the table, I don't think this investment made sense. I mean, I think he's enough of an entrepreneur and an engineer to make financial sense when he builds Twitter, now X, into what he envisions that it could be. Adding the video, which is already done, adding the payment processing, and just all the things that he thinks it can turn into. But I think when he took it over, he was just upset about what he viewed as the draconian control of free speech that the political system had, and I think he just thought it was really important. Oh, and of course, all the rest of his businesses can't really get off the ground if if an oppressive government regime controls everything. So there's that.
Right. That's what I'm saying. That if he's looking ahead to the 10, 15 year vision that I just sketched, assume he's even in the same ballpark as that he's in his mind, he's like, yeah, I just got to make sure I don't get arrested or killed before then, or, shut down in some way.
It's a good point. Yeah.
And so, what can I do? Well, certainly by him keeping Twitter relatively open, that's limiting the ability of the U.S. authorities to do what they want to do. You know what I mean? And so I could see how in his mind, just purely instrumentally as a means to
it still fits. You're right.
Fend them off while he's still
fits.
and it's fine. Just, if the mob families are going to war with each other, you might have your side, or you might say, I'm glad that they're shooting at each other and not at me. So anyway, none of this, I'm just trying to give neutral analysis in terms of Elon Musk, that I think people should be looking at him. Here's what I'm trying to say, Adam. I'm putting my finger on it. Growing up, I always thought that, there's the political officials and then there's the heads of corporations, and those are two different spheres. Because no, this is the private sector and this is voluntary market, and these are the bad. And now I am more seeing it as these companies become as powerful as mid-sized government, political states, including with their armies and everything, and intelligence organizations and economic might and whatnot. I could see it making sense to stop making this bifurcation between a private company, and I think at some point you just got to have a broader category of analysis.
I mean, the distinction was always something of a fiction, like all the way back to Alexander Hamilton, right? I mean, you've got private interests manipulating the government to enrich themselves, since forever, before that even. So, it was always a distinction in just epistemologically, a distinction in kind, not a distinction in practice. Obviously, in practice, the two things are intertwined all the time, because that's what power does. It's corrupting.
Right.
And the one thing will use the powers of the other to enrich itself. And you can't keep them apart. They're like, magnetically attracted, wealth and political power. How can you keep them separate? You can't.
I guess what I'm saying, though, is I think even there, so I was always on board with what you just said, but at what point would you, if it gets to the point where Tesla or SpaceX, whatever, Elon Musk Enterprises, that viewed as a whole collection of power emanating around him, his influence on what happens on planet Earth, at some point, I don't think it makes sense to say, oh, that's still a bunch of private companies that have figured out how to engage in crony relations with the other states. I think at some point that is its own deal. And it comes to an arrangement with other states, but just like Switzerland and Nazi Germany can, sign a treaty or something, and they can come to an understanding. And so I think at some point he gets so big, it's like, if you want to say, oh, it's a private company, but well, in which jurisdiction? You know what I mean? If it's a global thing, it's
like, to me, this seems just like regression towards the mean almost. Like we used to have powerful people called kings, and they were power centers unto themselves. Mm-hmm. And then we invented nation states and tricked ourselves into thinking that democracy is a thing, and tricked ourselves even further to say we can invent something called a republic. And we've transcended this thing where powerful men act powerfully in the world. And if the techno wizardry that you're describing 15 years from now under Elon Musk comes to pass, I just think that's going back to powerful kings again. And we're just no longer fooling ourselves about, oh, we're in America and that's a republic with a limited government and our rights are enshrined. We have 10 of them here. They're in this Bill of Rights. I just feel it's like that. I think the whole period of time called the nation state was just a hypnosis that we did to ourselves.
Okay, yeah, I think you're right. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm trying to refine a bit my taxonomy.
Taxonomy, that's the word I was trying to look for.
Organizations that before I had a somewhat simplistic private sector company versus public sector state, and I think that's at some point that the lines between them get blurred or something, and
like
I'm
even
trying to come up with a more general framework.
Even 30 or 40 years ago, what would you have called Don Corleone? What would you have called the mafia? Taxonomy.
Oh, I guess I'm okay with calling it a crime family, something like that.
But it does things the governments did. I mean, part of the reason they're supposed to have support of the public in their neighborhoods is they're doing these,
Right.
fireworks and
Yep.
banquets
Yep.
and
Yeah.
just like an old Viking king would or something. These things get muddled. I guess my
Yeah.
argument is they've always been pretty muddled.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I would have to think about that some more. You're right. Like it could just be that moving along the spectrum from a completely legitimate law respecting organization to a crime organization, a criminal enterprise to a state is just a matter of degree. Because the crime family too, that I guess they have their protection money, and you could call that it's like taxation. And
Kinda.
you're right that they start. Yeah, because I've read folks like books on like the Gaudis and stuff like that, and yeah, they would do things like put on fireworks shows and give a form of justice. Like if somebody in the community was being disruptive, or like if there was a rapist or something like that, they wouldn't necessarily call the cops. They would just go and the
Yeah, their
Gotti family
operation-
would make sure that our
Their
neighborhood
operation
stays
couldn't
clean.
have any longevity if they didn't give some kind of order that looked like the kind of order a government would provide. They wouldn't have survived at all.
Yep.
Anyway, we've gone a little bit far afield of Mr. Musk and Mars, but it's always real fun to talk to you, Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, I will say Elon Musk I think is smarter than John Gotti Jr. I'm comfortable saying that.
Put an exclamation point on it, and I'll underscore that. All right, hit the likes and subscribes for all our various channels, ladies and gentlemen, and me and Bob, see ya.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.